One Book, One College speaker series based on Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. Let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Rose. I'm the faculty lead for the first year of the Pathways program. So I oversee College One, all of the speaker series events around Dawn, the student conference, and then the kind of big keynote, which will be on Wednesday, December 6th. So I'll be seeing you several more times, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing your research posters on Tuesday, November 14th. We're going to have judges, we're going to have librarians out there looking at your research, and lots of second-year students. So please, put all your effort into it. There'll be about 650, 700 posters out there. And so you really want to do your best to make yours stand out among all the others. So today we have a wonderful speaker who will explore the topic of consent. So I know that this is a major theme in Dawn. It's a hot topic that my students have been really engaged in talking about. And so that's one of the reasons I brought Erin, who has written books on this topic, to come and speak to you from an expert point of view. There will be 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, for questions and answers. So Erin's going to talk for about 30 minutes. So while he's speaking, if a question pops into your head, please do write it down. So that way you have it ready at the end. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I am 100% confident that you will all show your utmost respect to our speaker by being fully engaged, paying attention, and not looking at your devices. Okay? Is my confidence deserved?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so let me give a brief introduction to our speaker. Aaron Hartzler has written books, screenplays, and a great number of tweets. His first book, Rapture Practice, is a true story about his own life, a memoir about getting kicked out of his Christian high school in Kansas City 2 weeks before graduation. The New York Times called Rapture Practice effervescent and moving, evocative, and tender. It was also named one of Amazon's best books of 2013 and was a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. Aaron's second book, published in 2015, is a novel entitled What We Saw. Inspired by the events in the Steubenville rape case, this thought-provoking story about consent and truth tells a story of a girl named Kate whose friend is assaulted by student athletes at a party, and how Kate navigates small-town politics to find out what really happened. I've seen Aaron Hartzler speak at least twice in the past, and he's amazing and engaging, so I know you're going to have a very exciting and wonderful event. Okay, let's welcome our guest.
Sheila, thank you for having me. After an introduction like that, I feel like I should, I have to be like a ride at Six Flags or something. Just so I know kind of who I'm talking to, how many of you just got out of high school in May? This is your first time in college? Okay, great. Also, do I have any creative writers in the group? Anybody who writes or wants to write? Go ahead, put it up, it's okay. All right. Excellent. Dawn is such an interesting book, and I love people who can write fantasy. I'm not one of those people, but I love fantasy that pulls real-life issues into a conversation. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit. I have this big pile of paper. It's a really big font just because I'm old and I can't see anymore. So it's not going to last forever, but I want to talk at you for a second, and then I want to talk with you for a second. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit about who I am and my books and how and issues of consent, and then I'd like to talk to you a little bit, and we can talk about anything. We can talk about the issues of consent. We can talk about writing and publishing, any of that stuff. I love being here because I'm working on 2 books right now, and coming out to speak to other people is like recess for my brain. So I'm just going to dive in here, and please do write down questions if you have them, or comments if you have them. And after I'm done giving you the spiel, then we'll have a little dialogue. So I am a writer. I've written 2 very different books that both feature protagonists who are around most of your ages. I'll get to that in a second, but before I go any further, I want to ask you a question. Will you speak up? I ask you that because I believe that everybody has a voice and that we live in a world where things are designed to keep you quiet. I'm not talking about the physical apparatus of your voice, the body parts of you that produce sound, although that's part of it. I'm talking about the part of your character that chooses what you will and will not do, that part of you that makes the decision to take action or to sit back and do nothing. So I ask you again, will you sit back and do nothing, or will you speak up? For a long time as I was growing up, nobody told me that my voice was unique. Nobody told me that by not speaking my truth, I was doing the world a disservice. See, I knew I had a voice, but I also had a secret. So for a long time, I used my voice to speak everybody else's truth but my own. I used my voice to hide. So back when I was a teenager, things were a little different. I graduated from high school in 1993. There were no iPhones or Androids or any other smartphones. Our phones were stupid phones. They were plugged into a wall, usually in the kitchen, with long spiraling cords in which one could easily become entangled. Only rich people had cell phones at all, and they were like the size of cinder blocks. There was no Facebook or Instagram. There was no Google. There was no place where you could sit down at a computer and find other people like yourself in the world. This wasn't a problem for most kids my age, but it presented a problem for me. See, I grew up in Kansas City, as Sheila mentioned, and that's like smack dab in the reddest part of the country. And my parents were part of an extremely conservative religion. It was almost a cult. If we hadn't had zippers, we would have been Amish. So when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch TV or go to the movies or listen to the radio. My dad is a preacher, and I'm the oldest of 5, and I basically grew up on stage at our church, singing and playing the piano. My dad would preach about how the God we believed in loved everyone, but thought that gay people were an abomination. So the version of God that I grew up with loved me, but wanted me dead. Welcome, you guys. No worries. So the way I grew up was really confusing. A lot of love, a lot of doom. I also attended a very religious high school where they taught that being gay was a sin, and so I was not going to tell anybody that I was gay. I was not going to speak my truth. I dated girls. I tried as much to be like the other people around me as I possibly could be. I tried to wear the same clothes everybody did. I tried to like the same music everybody did. I tried to watch the same movies everybody did, which was especially tricky because at my house I was only allowed to listen to the Christian radio station, and there was no TV, and if I wanted to see a movie, I had to sneak out to go to the theater and risk getting caught. And even though I was surrounded by adults who said that they loved me, and they did in the way they were able, I knew that I was different than who they thought I was. And I knew that if I told these people who I really was, if I really spoke up and used my voice to tell my truth, that there would be a problem. I understood that if my mom and dad knew who I really was, that I was a boy who liked other boys, that they wouldn't love me anymore. Or at least that's what I thought. So I hid who I really was as best I could. I used my voice to say things that other people wanted me to say. I did not speak up. And not speaking up, it made me feel terrible because I had been raised to be honest. I had been taught that it was always right to tell the truth and that lying was never good. But my family believed in this version of God with a capital G who knew everything about me. He knew what I was thinking and what I would think even before I thought it. And the fact that I was thinking about other guys, I was told he hated that. So I tried harder. I ran track. I did all the extracurricular arts activities that I could. I sang in the choir, I played the piano, I drew pictures, I painted, I played the clarinet in the band, and I was the lead in the school musicals, and I wrote stories, and I taught Sunday school at church. And even with all of that busyness, even with all of those teams and choirs and bands and cast members, even with all the people who told me I was so good at everything I was doing, I still felt alone. I don't know, maybe some of you feel alone. Because even though I was using my voice a lot, I wasn't speaking up. And I didn't speak up for a long time. I did talk. I talked all the time. In fact, the physical apparatus part of my voice, the sound it makes when it comes out of my mouth, that got made fun of when I was a kid. I got teased for plenty of stuff. I have goofy ears and big lips. I like to wear bright colors, and those were all things I got teased about. There were older guys at my school who used to ask me if I was half black because I had big lips, as if all black people have big lips, as if being black were some sort of terrible problem. These were the same guys who said my voice sounded like a girl, as if being a girl was the worst put-down they could think of. There were older guys who called me a fairy, as if being gay were something that was terrible and funny and something over which I had any control. Luckily for me, there was one other thing besides track and band and choir and piano and all that stuff that I did during those years. I read. I didn't read websites because there weren't any. I didn't read blogs or Twitter or Facebook because there weren't any of those either. I read books. I read actual paper books that I got at the library. And you know what I found out in those books? I found out that there were teenagers in the world who were popular but didn't ever feel like they fit in. And there were teenagers who were unpopular and got picked on all the time, even more than I did. I read books that told me that there were boys who liked other boys and girls who liked other girls and people who were straight as an arrow but also queer as a football bat. I found out that there were plenty of people who didn't fit in anywhere at all, and that this was not only okay, that it could be an asset. I learned many things by reading books, but mainly I learned that I was not alone. Books showed me that people who are weird as teenagers grow up to be interesting adults. Books taught me that the stuff you get picked on for in high school gets you paid when you grow up. I'm living proof of that. I wanted to tell stories when I was a kid. I wanted to sing and act and write and be on stage in front of big groups of people and talk about my creative take on stuff that happens in real life. And thanks to you and Sheila and PCC, here I am, talking about the stories that I write. See, books showed me that there were places for people like me in the world. One of those places was New York. Another one was Los Angeles. Books showed me that when I was a grown-up, if I could just hang on and get out of the house, that I would be able to choose my own family, my own friends, that I would find my tribe, and more importantly, that I could use my voice to speak my truth instead of somebody else's. Books taught me to speak up. And finally, one day I did that. I told my parents I was gay right after I graduated from high school. And do you know what happened? They totally freaked out. It's true. They went bananas. They preached and sobbed and quoted Bible verses. They're still not okay with it. I'm pretty sure they never will be. But you know what happened once I decided to speak up? Things got better. You know, a lot of you are just out of high school, and maybe you were one of the kids at your high school who got picked on. Maybe you heard a lot. Everybody tell you, oh, it'll get better. It'll get better. And I'm here to tell you that they're not wrong. Some things do get better, but not everything gets better. There are still some people who don't like me, and my relationship with my parents is still weird. But you know the biggest way that it got better for me? Once I'd spoken up, I found my voice and started to use it, and it got easier and easier to do. It got easier to speak up and to tell my truth. One of the ways I do that is by writing. As Sheila mentioned, I got kicked out of that Christian high school I went to 2 weeks before graduation. And a few years ago, I wrote a book about that experience called Rapture Practice. I found the courage to speak up, and I get emails every week from teenagers and young adults, people mainly your age, telling me their stories of growing up in a place where they felt afraid to speak up too. Some of them aren't gay, some of them have never been to church in their life, but the thing that they relate to is powerlessness. My latest book, Sheila also mentioned this, is the one about consent. It's called What We Saw. It's a story of a young woman named Kate, who is a junior in high school. Kate lives in a little town in Iowa, and she leaves a party early one night with a guy she has a crush on. When she wakes up the next morning, there are pictures and tweets online hinting at what happened at the party after she left. A former friend of hers named Stacy claims that several of the guys on the basketball team assaulted her while she was drunk. Kate's friends and parents, the whole town in fact, have opinions about what happened to Stacy. Some of them say she's lying. Some of them say that Stacy should have known better than to get drunk or to wear clothes that were so sexy to a party. The general consensus of Kate's town is that Stacy was asking for it. In What We Saw, Kate can't believe how her friends are so quick to blame Stacy and believe the guys who are accused of the rape. So she sets out to determine what happened, and once she knows for sure, she has a decision to make. It's one of the things that I'm glad you're reading Dawn, because there's an aspect of that book where the protagonist doesn't have the power to make decisions, right? And that's one of the things that I want to talk about. In what we saw, even though Kate knows what happened, she has to make a decision whether to speak up or not. And at its heart, what we saw is a book about a young woman who is learning to take action instead of sitting back and doing nothing. She's learning how to make her own decisions, to form her own opinions, to find her voice, and to speak her truth. What we saw is sadly based on actual events, and we've seen these events over and over in the news for the last 5 or 6 years. Rape allegations are finally being taken seriously. It's happened all over the place at colleges like Duke, where the lacrosse team was implicated. At Columbia, there was a young woman there about 2 years ago who strapped her own mattress to her back and carried it from class to class to protest the lack of action that was taken by the disciplinary committee when she followed the procedures to report her own sexual assault. At Stanford a couple years ago, I don't know if you remember this, there was the swimming star who got pulled off the girl from behind the dumpster late one night at a party. What we saw is actually based on an incident in Steubenville, Ohio, where 2 high school football players were arrested in 2012 and accused of raping a fellow student who was passed out drunk at a party. And even though the town, in real life, just like in my book, circled the wagons around these guys, tried to help them delete the evidence that had been posted on social media, the truth eventually came out. Those 2 young men were convicted and both spent time in jail. But even with that going on, it didn't stop it from happening again and again and again. It happened in Maryville the next year, in Missouri. A 13-year-old and a 14-year-old girl were raped, and a video of the incident was circulated around the school. These are all cases of rape where the victim either said no and was ignored, or where she was taken advantage of because she was too drunk to give consent. And the thing that's staggering to me about each one of these cases is that other people were present during the incident. Other people watched. In the Steubenville case, there were multiple videos of the assault taken by multiple students. The young woman was carried around in a blackout by her hands and her ankles. These videos were circulated on social media and then deleted. And Anonymous, the hacker collective, had to start releasing videos in order to get people to go to the police and tell them who had been present at the time of the incident. These were young men and young women who were around your age. Individuals who stood by while a girl with whom they attended school drank so much that she blacked out. And then they filmed and took photographs of a crime as she was carried to 2 different locations, while popular football players laughed and joked and assaulted her. Recently, Rutgers University released a study about campus sexual assault with some startling figures. 1 in 5 women say that they have experienced unwanted sexual contact since arriving on campus, and 12% of young men report the same thing. Now, maybe you say, oh, that never happened to me. I'm a guy. That's never going to happen. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe it won't happen to you. But chances are, with numbers that high, it will happen to a friend of yours. It will happen to somebody you know. It will happen to somebody you might be sitting next to right now. And possibly, it could happen in your presence. And that's why I ask you again, will you speak up? Will you make the decision to step forward and take action, or will you choose to sit by and do nothing? Sexual consent between 2 people must be enthusiastic, voluntary, and unambiguous. It must be mutual. Folks, that means you have to ask. Silence is not consent. 3 years ago, in fact, our Governor Jerry Brown, here in the state of California, signed into law a yes means yes law, right? Anybody heard of this law? I see 1 hand. Anybody else? There's 2. All right, 3. Yes means yes. According to this law, all students in California now need to get a verbal yes or a signal of consent in a nonverbal way. However, the absence of active resistance or verbal objections to sex no longer constitutes consent. All right, I'm going to say that again because I want you to hear it and take it in. The absence of active resistance or verbal objections to sex will no longer constitute consent. What does that mean? That means if the person you're having sex with hasn't said yes, but isn't saying no, well, that means that later, if they come to you and say, I didn't want to have sex with you that night, you're on the hook for that. You can be prosecuted. Maybe you've decided not to have sex right now, at this point in your life. That is your choice, and it's valid simply because it's your choice. You don't owe anybody an explanation. You don't have to defend that. Your sexuality is yours. It's no one else's. It's yours to explore and experience. It's a deeply personal aspect of your being, capable of bringing much joy and also much heartbreak. So if you decide to wait to have sex, that is your decision, and that decision should be respected. Likewise, if you decide to explore your sexuality at this point in your life, that decision should also be respected. Your body is your own, and there are plenty of ways to say yes to sex, just like California law now requires. My favorite way to say yes to sex is actually saying yes. But it is important to remember that with the privilege of exercising your sexuality, there comes great responsibility. If someone is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, he or she is not capable of giving consent. I'm going to repeat that. If somebody else is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they are not capable of giving consent. Any sex that happens under those circumstances can later be called non-consensual. Non-consensual sex means that you had sex with someone who didn't say that you could. It's also important to remember that consent can be taken away at any time. That means that whether you're just getting going or you're about to wrap up or anywhere in between, if your partner says no or stop or pushes you away, that means you stop. Your partner has decided that he or she doesn't want to continue, and if you keep going, that's rape. People ask me all the time, why did you decide to write a book about sexual consent? Were you raped as a teenager? And there were a lot of reasons that I decided to write this book. The answer is no, I was not raped as a teenager. However, I know what it is like to grow up in a place where you have no voice. A place where you feel like all of your decisions are being made for you. I know that that's a recurring theme in Dawn, right? To honor that place, to shine a light on that place of powerlessness, I ask you again, will you speak up? Will you embrace the powerful voice that you have? In what we saw, the main character, Kate, has to decide whether or not she'll use her voice to speak up, and even though it means losing something that is very important to her. Again and again at Duke and Columbia and Steubenville and Maryville, high school and college kids at parties stood by while someone was raped and did nothing. They laughed, they took pictures, but they said nothing. They stifled their own truth deep inside and refused to raise their voices to speak up. At Stanford a couple years ago, things were different. Two students who happened to be passing by decided that they could not pretend to ignore what was happening. They got off their bikes and they pulled a young man off of an unconscious young woman. They let it be known that his behavior was unacceptable. They raised their voices. They spoke up. Will you speak up? When you're at a party and you see a friend trying to put the moves on a girl who has had too much to drink, will you speak up? The philosopher Edmund Burke once said that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men, or women, do nothing. There is a complicity in silence. What is the correct response when you see somebody who's had too much to drink at a party? Is it to assume that that person wants to have sex with you? What is the correct response to a drunken come-on or somebody who's passed out? Is it to have sex with that person, to take advantage of him or her? I'm here to tell you that it is not, and you know that. There are a lot of other options. And at the risk of being pedantic, let's go through them. What are the other options? Well, find that person's friend. Help him or her get home. An Uber, a blanket, a pillow, a glass of water, some Advil, telling your friend to back off. These are the correct responses. These are the things that you'd hope somebody would do for your sister or your girlfriend or your brother or your boyfriend. Maybe you're committed to a career path here now that you're here, you've got lots of ideas, you're not sure what it is or what it's going to be. Maybe it's in the arts, singing, dancing, painting, acting. Maybe you're committed to sports, basketball, football, running, athletics. Maybe it's engineering. Maybe it's sciences. I know that since I was in high school, the possibilities have become endless. And often when I talk to people who are just out of high school or just starting college, I'll ask and say, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And often, the answer I get is famous. If you don't hear anything else I say today, hear this. Your talent and your ability, coupled with your hard work, may indeed make you famous. But your character can make you legendary. What do I mean by that? What is character? Dictionary definition says that character is the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. Now, you'll notice that that definition doesn't define whether those qualities are good or bad. In fact, it can be either, depending on what your distinct qualities are. There's a man in the White House right now who is an active participant in rape culture. He talks about women as if they are objects. We all heard him. We all heard him. He said that when he sees an attractive woman, he can't help himself. Sometimes he just has to go up to her and grab her by her private parts. Whatever your political point of view is, you can't argue with the fact that this guy is our president now, and he views women as objects for his pleasure, not as humans with their own desires and their own ability to make decisions about having sex. If he sees someone attractive, he just grows up and grabs them. During the campaign last year, he tried to downplay these comments. He said it was just locker room talk. Yeah, right? There was a vocal group of professional athletes who took to Twitter when he said this. And do you know what they tweeted? Do you guys remember? Not in my locker room. A group of pro athletes said that this was not how they wanted to be defined, that this was not their character. What about you? How do you talk about girls or guys in your locker room or with your group of friends? As sexual objects who are to be used for your pleasure? How do you want to be defined? By your talent? Good. By your hard work? Excellent. By your determination? Yes. All of those things may make you famous. Some of those things made our president famous. But the thing we'll always remember about him is his character. In his obituary, they'll mention that live mic tape, that he thought it was okay to grab women without their consent. Remember, your actions either underline or cross out what you say. Guys, maybe you say that you'd never want anybody to grab your sister or your mom or your niece. But when you're walking down the hall here at school or out in the world or at a party, and your friend grabs somebody's butt, what do? What do you say? You laugh? Give a high five? You look the other way and stay silent? We talk a lot about rape culture. You've heard this term. What is rape culture? What do we mean by that? We're talking about a culture that normalizes rape, a culture that normalizes sexual violence against others. And folks, rape culture doesn't just live at a party when there's a girl passed out. It lives in that split second between when your friend cops a feel in the hallway and you make a choice. And trust me, you make a choice. Either you laugh, or you tell them to knock it off and apologize, or you say nothing. Remember, for evil to triumph, all that is required is for good men to do nothing. Your character is determined by your decisions. And let me remind you that doing nothing, saying nothing in that situation is a decision. It shows the world who you are. So who are you? Will you speak up? I urge each of you to visit a website that I love. It's called itsonus.org. Write that down. Put it in your phone. You can use your phone right now. itsonus.org. It's a website where you can take a pledge to step in and intervene in situations where someone else might be at risk of sexual assault. It's a pledge that helps you make a personal commitment to keeping others safe from sexual assault. It is a promise not to be a bystander to the problem, but to be part of the solution. The pledge on that side reads, I pledge to recognize that non-consensual sex is sexual assault. I pledge to identify situations in which sexual assault may occur. I pledge to intervene in situations where consent has not or cannot be given. I pledge to create an environment in which sexual assault is unacceptable, and survivors are supported. Today, I'm not only urging you to get permission from the person you might like to hook up with, I'm urging you to give yourself permission. The permission to look out for others. The permission to speak up. The permission to be the good guy or the girl in any situation where someone else might be at risk. All it takes is one good example to learn how to speak your own truth. One person speaking up can help you find and use your voice. Today, it's my hope that I can be that person. And after today, I hope that you can be that person. I know many of you are just starting out. A lot of you just got out of high school, and it's exciting, and it's weird, and I remember it being uncomfortable. When I got out of high school, it was like liberating and terrifying at the same time. I went from a place where someone else was making all of my decisions for me to a place where I had the freedom to make any decision that I wanted to. Which decision will that be? In the face of seemingly infinite choices, you can sometimes feel paralyzed and powerless. You know, I couldn't even listen to the radio when I was a kid. So trust me when I say that I know what it feels like to feel powerless. Trust me also when I tell you that you are powerful beyond your imagination. The things you've been insecure about for the past few years, all that stuff that got you picked on, this is it. This is it right now. This is that moment where some of those same things will begin to turn into your greatest assets. Do not change them. Do not hide them. Be them. Be the weird that you want to see in the world. We need you. We need your voice. No matter what your background or what you've overcome to be here today, you have the power to make things better for you, for your friends, for this nation, for our world. The simple fact is this: the reason that things got better for me personally is not because other people changed, but because I did. Things changed for me the moment I found my voice and I started to speak my truth. Things will change for you when you start to speak up. And they'll change for all of us if you do. This is the moment where the choices you make begin to separate you from your parents and your family and from all that came before. This is the moment where you become your own person. This is the moment where you give yourself the consent to step forward and speak up, and where the actions you choose to take or not take begin to define your character. They begin to define who you are. Your actions will either underline or cross out what you say. So choose wisely. Be good to yourself and to each other. Look out for one another. Encourage one another. And above all, speak up. Thanks. Okay, so that's my spiel. Let's talk. I'm curious, how many of you have ever had somebody address issues of consent or rape culture or sexual assault with you in a formal setting like this, whether it's like on a sports team in high school or in a class here at college? Anybody? Let me see hands. Is anybody? Okay, good. So I'm really glad, Sheila, that we are talking about this, and especially that Dawn is the book that you're reading. I wonder, do any of you have questions for me about anything? We can talk about anything. It only takes one hand. Yes, I see that hand.
What was it like holding in that, knowing that you liked other guys, like and knowing that you were the one that you were teaching Sunday school and trying to hide and not?
Yeah, it was awful.
How did that feel?
It was awful. Especially when you think you're never going to find love in the world, right? Like back then it was different. I couldn't go online and find the Trevor Project or find, there were no gay-straight alliances. That wasn't even a thing. So
you doing all of these extracurriculars, you tried to distract yourself to see if you would change in a way, and obviously, or was it just to How did you not?
You know, it was a distraction. Yeah. So she asked, did I do all these extracurriculars so that I could change in a way? I didn't think I was going to change, but I knew that if I could distract myself, and really it was about not only distracting myself, but distracting everybody else from what was so clearly true about me. So if I get good enough grades, if I do well enough in this or that, you know, then I'll get that love that I need, and you won't hate me. Yeah.
Because you grew up in such a conservative environment, did you intrinsically feel that being gay is wrong, or did you intrinsically feel you were just stuck in this environment?
That's interesting. So because I grew up in that conservative environment, did I feel like being gay was wrong, or did I just feel like I was stuck? You know, it's funny. I never thought that God was angry at me. I was afraid that other people were going to be angry with me, right? I didn't, you know, when you grow up with a certain, just like everybody who grows up straight, there's not one morning you wake up and are like, I'm straight, right? So there's not one morning that I like woke up and was like, oh, I'm gay now, you know, like. So yeah, it wasn't like, yeah. So I think that's the equivalence, right? So I kind of didn't, if what I learned in Sunday school was that God created us the way that we are, and whatever you think of God or whatever your spiritual journey is, like if we're put on this earth the way that we are, I wasn't concerned that there was going to be some ultimate punishment for me being who I was. I just was afraid that everybody else was going to be angry at me. Yeah, and that's part of finding your voice and speaking up. You know, I will say this. All Dawn and also what we saw, a lot of the work that I do touches on sexism and touches on misogyny, touches on whether we think men and women are equal. I do. Because I think men and women are equal and should be treated equally, that makes me a feminist. Whatever else you've heard associated with that word, that's the definition. If you think men and women are equal and should be treated as such, you're a feminist. And I hinted at this earlier, but you know, when the worst put down we can think of is to call somebody a girl, guys, we have a problem culturally. Girl is not a put down, right? Sissy is not a put down. The feminine trait somebody has should not be used as a battering ram. Even the word pussy has become derogatory in our language, right? Sandra Bernhard, anybody know Sandra Bernhard, the comedian? I saw her perform once, and she said, I'm trying to reframe that word pussy into something good. Like, God, it was so pussy of you to come help me move. Think about that. Think about the way we talk. Gay, the word gay is the same way, right? Right? That's so gay. What do we mean by that? Our words have meaning. That's gay, means that it's bad or not good or not desirable, right? Things to think about when you talk. And also, guys, let me just say this. The feminist men in this room who do believe that men and women should be treated equally and are equals, that means that young women have the same onus over their sexuality that you do, right? They get to determine when they have sex and what they want. That's one of the things that I think we miss in this conversation about rape culture sometimes and about consent, is that we don't empower young women to take over their own sexual agency. We say, oh no, you can't dress a certain way, you can't get too drunk, you can't do that, you can't do that. No, your sexuality is your own. You get to decide, right? And also, guys, for my feminist men out there, it is imperative that you speak up on behalf of women when you are in those situations, because by definition, the guys who perpetrate rape culture cannot hear their female victims, right? If they respected the women and the voices that they're hurting and assaulting, they wouldn't do it. So it's imperative that you stand up in that moment. Look, marriage equality, as a gay guy, marriage equality didn't happen in this country because a bunch of gay guys finally pushed it through, right? No, it took 52% of the state of Minnesota, the straight people there, running phone banks in their living rooms, making sure that the constitutional amendment didn't pass, because there were not enough of us, right? By definition, the issue with rape culture isn't a woman's problem. It's a straight guy problem. It's an us problem. It's an everybody problem, right? Just like racism isn't a minority problem. It's white people problem, right? We're the ones with the problem. Just some thoughts. Yes?
How do you compromise God's love for our humans in general versus like his disallowance of homosexuality?
How do I compromise God's love for humans in general versus his disallowance of homosexuality? Well, I'm just going to be real frank. After I left my background, I did a lot of research about where the ideas that we believed came from. I did a lot of research on where the Bible actually came from, where the Bible we read today in churches came from. And I think that the Bible is a really great piece of Bronze Age literature, but I think that I don't believe it is the inerrant, inspired Word of God. And that's another conversation for another class probably, but you know, a lot of people who go to, and I've had tons and tons of people say, oh, we love gay people at our church, you should come to our church. And the problem is that my faith was sort of set up as an all or nothing proposition, right? You've heard this Bible verse that either you are, because you're lukewarm, God will spew you out of his mouth, be either hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. And the analogy there is that either you believe or you don't believe. And if you doubt, it's the same as not believing, right? So my young faith was set up as either you believed all of it, and if you didn't believe the parts of the Bible about slavery or the really horrible parts about women or gays or that snakes talk, then you didn't believe any of it. And so I went to a lot of those affirming churches for a long time trying to find that, you know, I was wired for faith in God and community of church. And I just kept sitting in room after room after room of people who were apologizing for our holy book, and it finally dawned on me that none of these people believed their own holy book. Like they were trying to find the meaning and purpose and comfort of what was supposed to be a myth that explained our existence, you know, our myth of our meaning and purpose, which is great. And a lot of the churches that I went to that did that, there's a great one here in Pasadena, All Saints is great. They're all about social justice and striking with the janitors and immigrant rights and the whole thing. But I realized that I could do all those things and have that great feeling of community by doing those things without having to believe that snakes talk. Yes?
So like what are your thoughts on the issue of the double standard where guys are able to have sex with as many women as they want and not get called out for it, whereas women who have free sex, like free choice over who they want to sleep with, get called whore or slut?
Right. So with the whore slut issue, so slut shaming. What do I think about the fact that guys are called studs when they have 50 partners and women are called sluts? Well, that goes right back to whether or not we think women have agency over their own sexuality, right? Do we believe that women are equal to men? If we do, who they sleep with is their business, not yours. Period. And that's another thing. If you hear people slut shaming, and girls are sometimes the worst about slut shaming, I will tell you. The girls in my high school, God, you wore the wrong shade of lipstick and you were a Jezebel, you know what I mean? Like it was this thing. So if you're hearing that as a guy or a girl, call that out. Say it. Yes?
Are you familiar with the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why?
Yes. Am I familiar with the Netflix? Yes. My friend Jay Asher wrote that book, and he's a fantastic author. Why do you ask?
I don't know, because it seems so in line with what this discussion was about.
Yeah, it is in line. For those of you who haven't watched it, 13 Reasons Why is about a girl who is, all of these things that we're talking about come to bear on why she commits suicide. And if you think that there aren't people being bullied to death in this country, you're wrong. I can show you I can give you URLs to links to news stories endlessly about girls and guys who die because they take their own lives. And a lot of them are high school students who don't have the perspective of understanding that once they get out of this situation, they will go find their tribe and things will get better. But it's real, and that's why I say words mean something. Words mean something. Other questions, comments, anything about writing or the writing process or publishing or any of that is good too, yes?
What was it like coming out to your friends?
To my friends? So the question was, what was it like coming out to my friends? It was sort of a non-issue. They were like, yeah, we know. You were the only one confused, yeah.
I was pretty fascinated by your story because people are always judged by others' religions if they're gay or if they're homosexual or something. I think I met a lot of friends that are actually gay and like girls love girls, boys love boys, like guys love, girls love. I saw them doing that sometimes and I was very confused and uncomfortable. But then I realized that's just the way they are. I mean, why am I going to just tell them what they need to do? I'm also a Christian, but I don't want to be a jerk that telling people what are they supposed to do. I mean, religions are just stupid.
Okay, so the comment here is, she's a Christian and she's like, I have a lot of friends in my circle who are gay or lesbian or bi or otherwise or fluid or, and I don't want to be a jerk, right? Here's the thing. If you're still involved in a religion, make sure that religion is all about love. Make sure that the sustenance and the soul goodness you're getting from that comes from the love, not from the exclusion. I have no problem with communities of faith or people who believe even, any part of the Bible is the inspired word of God, as long as it's not the part where that tells you how to beat your slaves or that women should stay quiet all the time. You know what I mean? That it's the exclusionary parts of organized religion that sadly make a lot of people feel very comfortable because there's a room this size full of people all nodding yes at the same thing, right? And your voice gets drowned in that, right? So make sure that you're if you're a part of a religion, it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not a problem. As long as your love for other people is the point. And let me qualify that. My parents are people who I love, and we're in contact, and there are some boundaries on that, but they believe that the best thing they can do, that if they love you the most, that they are going to tell you exactly that you're wrong and terrible and all this stuff, right? So your job, if you're in the midst of a community like that, is to be the person who speaks up, right? And says, you know what? I'm just going to love. This is about love for me. And no one has ever decided to come to your side because you said they were wrong and terrible.
Why did you choose LA as opposed to New York?
Why did I choose LA as opposed to New York? Honestly, I was on my way to New York. I was an actor when I first moved here 20 years ago. And I came out to California to do summer stock theater, which is like in the summer you do like 4 shows a week. And I was on the Central Coast. I was doing Grease. I was playing Kaneki. And I fell in love with one of the greasers, and he was moving to LA. And I was like, oh, I'll move to LA with you for a few months. That relationship didn't last, but I fell in love with LA. So it's just too hard to be poor in New York. It's so cold. Yes?
In Dawn, there's a very short little segment where they talk about how the siblings end up naming the movie. But there's one couple they mentioned that are cousins that didn't like their siblings. Why do you think that was in there? Why did she put that in there? It's just very short.
I don't know. I will tell you that book is crazy. Like I love it, but I would not even begin to speak for her. Get her to come speak. She died. That's right. Get Ava DuVernay to come speak when she directs the TV because.
Do you feel like it was sort of pointing out that people could be different?
Yeah, I think that whole book. Yeah, that whole book is all about the way different people react to the same sort of stress and the same sort of environment. Yeah, let's go with that because who knows? I mean,
I know. It just struck me that it was why put that in there unless there was some reason.
Jamie, you can ask that question at the keynote. Okay. Because we're going to have a theater group, LA's premier African American theater group, enact parts of Dawn, And then we're going to have Ayanna from the Octavia Butler Legacy Network there. And so we can explore that then. Okay, cool. Any more questions for Aaron? Yes.
Why did you stop acting?
Why did I stop acting? I haven't. I still do. Yeah. I just shot a web series in February that is shopping right now. So, yes.
Do you have any tips for an aspiring actor?
Yeah. Act as much as you can. No, and I say that not facetiously. Like, so in LA especially, it's hard because you act. Even if you have an agent who's sending you out, you act for like 30 seconds twice a week in auditions, and they're eating a bagel and like looking for a pen, and so like it's just not. So go take class. Have a group of people who keeps you accountable for actually flexing that muscle and doing it. If you're an actor or a writer or a singer or a dancer or a chef or any of those fine arts fields, you can start right now. Don't wait, start now. Do it. When I got here, I started writing. That's how I got to writing, was I started writing stand-up and one-man shows for myself so that agents would come see me and send me out on auditions. And that's where a lot of the stories about my family came from and where the book eventually came from. So there are a lot of ways to start now in any of those professions. If you want to be a lawyer or a neurosurgeon, please don't start now. I'm sorry. You do need a few more years of training. But if look, to be creative, there's a great Ira Glass. Ira Glass does This American Life. I don't know if you guys know him. Go on YouTube, look up Ira Glass on creativity. Just type in Ira Glass creativity. And he has this great speech that he gives about how when you're a young creative starting out, you know what you want to, where you want to be creatively and how you want to be able to produce the kind of quality work you want to be able to do, but you're not there yet. You're here. So you kind of just have to keep doing it until you get to where you want to be. And I think that's the trick with being a creative professional and actually getting paid for it, because you can. You can make money being a writer. You can make money being an actor. It's just that you have to outlast the crap you put out for a few years, and then you have to outlast the attrition of everybody else who finally quits. Especially in acting, that's how it works. From 1999 to 2006, I went to the same audition. I went to auditions with the same 8 people, and every year somebody else would be gone because they'd moved or gotten a desk job or whatever it was. And one year I was one of those people. I stopped auditioning for a few years so I could write a book, and I've kind of written my way back to acting. So. What got me into writing What We Saw? When Steubenville happened, my youngest sister was 17 years old and in high school, and I couldn't stop seeing it in the news, and I couldn't stop thinking about what it must be like to be her coming of age as a sexual being and as an adult in the middle of a national conversation about rape culture, and what it must be like for the kids in the town of Steubenville. I was like, what is it like for those kids who weren't at that party, who weren't involved, who were on the periphery, to see their town blow up like this in the news as this terrible place where terrible people do terrible things? And that was when the character of Kate popped into my head. And I was, I write books to answer questions about what I think about things. I write books to figure out what I think about things. And that was just on my mind. And so I started writing and thought, what is it to, I didn't know how the book was going to end when I started writing it. I knew how Steubenville had ended, but we didn't hear about any of the non-major players in that story. So we didn't hear about the friends at the party. We didn't hear about the kids who went home that night and didn't take pictures. We didn't know what happened to them. There's both a triumph and a heartbreak at the end of What We Saw. And I think, for me anyway, I always fall in love with my characters as I write, because I spend so much time with them. And I remember writing the end of What We Saw and crying because I thought, I wish I could make their lives easier for them. But life isn't easy, and it's not cut and dried. It's rarely black and white. So that's why it's important for you to have conviction and a voice and to speak up when you see things that are going on that are not within the realm of how you want your character to be defined. Remember, your character comes from the choices that you make. Every decision you make makes you who you are. Speak up.